City of Stevens Point Board of Park Commissioners meeting, recorded July 6, 2022.
Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the regular meeting for the Board of Parks Commissioners for July 6, 2022. Before we call the roll, we're happy to introduce and welcome Carrie Wynn as a new member to the commission. And with that, Director Kramer, would you mind calling the roll, please?
Freckman? Here. Ledowski is excused. Hall?
Here.
Alder-Kiemer?
Here.
McDonald?
Here.
O'Connor? Here. Shabilsky? Here. Alder Shores excused. Sorensen?
Here.
Wynn?
Here.
And Alder Zarazua? Here. You have a quorum.
Wonderful, thank you, Dan. Agenda item number 2 is approval of the June 1st, 2022 meeting minutes. You should have received that in your packet.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Oh, you know what, we're gonna let the newbie get it.
Okay.
So we have a motion by Alder Kiemer, second by Carrie Wynn, to accept the minutes. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. Agenda item number 3, and I will turn this over to Director Kramer. It's rejection of a bid for the Piffner Pioneer Park Bandshell roof and site repair project. Yeah.
So the recap on this, the history here is that about this time last year, we were kind of starting our capital budget process, and we had gotten past it. So we'd already finalized what the city was borrowing, what was going to happen. It came to our attention during a structural review of the Bandshell that we had a roof issue. That roof issue became exacerbated because it blew off during the winter in January. So we had it patched essentially by commercial roofing out of Plover. Following that, we hired, in consultation with our comptroller and treasurer's office, we used some of the city's contingency money for building repairs, unexpected building repairs, to hire CBS Squared to do a full eval and design document for a new roof, some new decking on the roof. The truss system, the glulam truss system underneath the roof is starting to rot on the ends. So it incorporated trying to wrap that with some soffit fascia. And then there's a beam, a support beam that's really hollowed out on the one side. So we went out for bid just for the roof component, some concrete repairs, and fixing that truss. And we got one bid. This is going back a couple months ago. We rejected that bid because it was approximately $40,000 over what we thought the estimate should have been based on what our consultant was telling us. So we delayed about a month. We went back out for bid, and unfortunately, it's actually going up again. So what we did at this point, when we got this bid, which is in your packet for a little over $100,000, is we went back to CBS Squared and just talked through it, and we've confirmed that the actual EPD on the roof repair is about $50,000. So there's some significant markup, and also based on the bidding timeline, the lead time, it just looks like economically right now is a very difficult time for it. So we started talking through what are the options, and essentially what we've learned from the roofer who did the patch in January is that as long as the seam along the edge of the roof is not exposed or peeling back, they believe we can probably get through another winter. So the reason that staff is recommending a rejection tonight is that we'd like to go back out for bid for a third time. But before we go out for bid, we'd like to budget, because we've not actually budgeted this construction expense, for a 2023 repair. So we can basically put this number in essentially as a worst case scenario in case we only get one bid again next year, that we can move forward. We can only bid this thing so many times. But it'll allow us to go out this fall, allow it to be like a July 1st of 2023 completion, so it's a long lead time. Hopefully, we all know that things are slowing up slightly, it sounds like, given some of the changes in our economy right now, and building materials are coming down a little bit. So we're hoping that if we would go out and say August or September, award it in late fall, potentially they could start this year, but most likely they'd start in the spring and finish next July. It would allow the city to budget the actual expense, and we could do that component of it. In addition to this, though, there was a second piece of the bid document, which was fixing that actual beam. So the roofing component is much different than that beam component, so it's two really different trades. And when you're dealing with the glulam structure, it's not just something that anyone can do. There's actually some specialists in it. We did not get a bid for that component of it. So in addition to this, we're going to be looking at either trying to find somebody as a direct contract, because there's some other, anything over $25,000 we have to publicly bid. But because we bid it and didn't get any bids for that component, there's some flexibility in the law of trying to contract it. So that also has to be addressed. So it's a long-winded way of saying we're a little bit back at the drawing board. We still have to do all these repairs, but staff recommendation is not to really double what we anticipated to spend here. We think that we can get at least that number in next year if we would, but to go back out for bid and reject the lone bid we have at this point. So I can answer questions on that if there is any. That's kind of, again, we've been at it for several months, and it's a little bit of a, if you look at the size of that roof, $100,000 is a lot of money for a roof that size. It's not, it's not a massive structure, so.
Director, can we only bid it 3 times? Is that the number?
We can, no, I mean, there's basically the city has the ability to award a bid or not award a bid in any component. What we can't do is say, for example, deny this bid and then just go hire a roofing contractor because of the dollar amounts. So really what we're gonna do here basically, if the commission agrees tonight and rejects it, is we would realign the bid and go back out for public bid at that process. The only thing that might change here slightly is maybe potentially we'd just separate the roofing component of it, and some of the other repairs can be done in a different format. But there's no, to my knowledge, there's no limit on, going back out. When bidding climates are really, inflated, or they're really high, or you can't get somebody to do it at a reasonable price, sometimes cities have to, take a pause button for a little while to go. But with that said, if we bid it a third time, let's say it comes in 100,000, I think we're at a point where we have to say, all right, if we want this done, we have to do it. But we're hoping that by structuring this slightly different, it won't come in anymore. But there's no way to guarantee that. It could come in more for sure too.
Yeah, just to make this clear, we're at a point where we've got to do something in the next year, is that correct?
Yeah, so the roofing contractor is maintaining that the roof has to be replaced. Technology.
I guess not a bottle opener, so. I guess as a follow-up to Bob, is there a chance that in the short term there could be even more damage over the course of the winter, and what might that look like?
So the biggest thing that could happen is if there was a penetration to the rubber membrane that's there now, we'd have to patch it. So basically, it'll require us to continue to monitor it like we've been, and there is areas where the roof decking has shifted, and you'll kind of see some points on that rubber membrane, but it's not given way. So really, we would just be keeping our eye on it. If we saw a leak, we'd have to patch that rubber membrane as best we can.
I'll make a motion to deny.
Okay, motion by
I'll
O'Connor.
second.
Second by Sue. I saw hands go up. So we've got a motion and a second to reject the bid for the Piffner Pioneer Park Bandshell. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you. Agenda item number 4, Director's Report.
Okay, so as you all know, we had the 38th annual Riverfront Rendezvous this last weekend. So tremendously successful again this year. So we hit the lottery for weather again. So both Friday we had Here Come the Mummies, which brought really a capacity crowd, which is great for Friday night. Usually, it can be hit or miss depending upon how the weather comes in. Saturday, we had all of the family fun activities again. So the fire department, led by Shane Westfall, as well as the police department with the police chief and Lieutenant Mueller. They had like a tie-dye shirt station, and I think they gave out over 100. They actually ran out of shirts, 150 shirts for the youth, and we had kids lined up, families, the whole day. So that's really been a really great component of the festival. We added a market in the park this year, so we had 22 tent vendors up on the north end that were just selling artisan goods from arts and crafts to art to, I think there was a infused maple syrup vendor, just a diverse offering of opportunities. We've actually saw that was so successful, we intend to probably double that next year. We had enough interest, we didn't charge much, but it was another attraction during the day, which is sometimes a downtime. Sunday, again, with the weather being nice, was capacity, even more capacity than we can handle all the way around. So some of the lines on the food vendors, somebody told me they got in line at 7 o'clock on firework night. The fireworks are going off at 9:30 by the food truck, and they hadn't gotten their food yet. So I really think we have it's a delicate balance to not overload the festival where food vendors don't have enough business. But on firework night, I really don't know if we can have enough food vendors because there's so many people down there. So overall, it was great. We're still working through the final numbers itself, but I think financially we're gonna have done really well this year, just based on some of the sponsorship and things that we had. It was the first year that Festival Foods was the naming rights exclusive firework sponsor, and we had a little bit more money going to the fireworks. Most of the feedback we've heard has been really good about those barges and the three firework locations that we were shooting off. So this year's, we'll close the books in the next 2 or 3 weeks as we write checks, and then next year we'll actually be falling right on championship weekend for the tournament out in Century. So we anticipate if we can have good weather next year, that this festival can continue to be bigger than it's ever been each year. It seems like we're growing in capacity.
Yeah.
So.
What about having music with the fireworks meeting? Is there any way we could get a radio station or somebody to, I know in Marshfield they do that.
So the city has our own radio station, so
Right.
it's been talked about and trying to coordinate. It's on our list of things to incorporate if we can. I think there's a chance that we could have something happen. We just haven't quite yet. It sounds like there was a couple years that they did do that off the Bandshell they played, and and then it kind of fell apart. So it's on our list. We got that feedback numerous times, like could we play it? Could people have it on the radio station? And with the city having a radio station, there might be some capabilities of doing that, but we're gonna have to look into it for next year.
So as a follow-up to that, Dan, is that something the city makes a decision on and then just coordinates with the fireworks vendor then, or how does that work?
Yeah, so the firework vendor, we contract with what they're called Spielbauer fireworks. So we actually redid that in 2020. We went out and solicited bids and changed firework vendors after about 12 years. They go through what's called sequencing. So let's say they're gonna shoot 600 shells. They actually give you kind of a shot count to kind of show you how many minutes the show is. So they can design it ultimately and say, here's kind of where it's gonna be fast and then it's gonna slow down a little bit. And my understanding is if, like, for example, say John Corp was gonna help us through the city's radio station, we could try to, have slower songs or faster songs or patriotic songs based on that. Is it perfect? Not necessarily, but they can kind of match it so that it makes sense with it. I don't know how like Marshall does it. It's probably a little bit more complex than that, but.
And I guess I'm looking at everybody's not gonna hear the music, but I think we could easily select a few places to put some speakers up.
Sure.
I also, congratulate you and your staff. Again, you've done a great job, your staff, so doing a real good job. Coordination with police and fire, everybody seemed to go real well, so.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And I will tell you, our full-time staff too, they spend basically 7-8 days setting up for it. And then they also alternate. We have a number of full-time employees down at the ground. Steve was there all weekend too, several others. So there's a lot, basically every seasonal employee we have works it. And then we alternate half of our full-time staff to make sure everybody's involved. So they give up a holiday weekend, but we get through it, works out well. And then we do have a lot of coordination from police and the fire department. The mayor's office is heavily involved. He's a big fan of the festival as well. So there's a lot that goes into it. So overall successful. We'll have more details on it next year. But like I said, there's years when it rains that we take a bath a little bit. Having 2 years of really good weather has helped us tremendously. So
Can we do something with the animal, the dog thing? I work for the PD, and a lot of issues with dogs, and I don't know how we can deal with that, but it's.
in conversations with former Director Schrader, it sounds like the animals in the park has been an issue from day one almost. I don't have the best solution. We try to put more signage out, I think, and try to educate as much as we can. But I think just given the volume of people, it's still a really small percentage of our festival goers. But to your point, usually, I don't want to say it results in a standoff, but it's usually a little bit of a confrontational interaction when we do tell people, hey, you can't have a pet here. So we're talking about more signage. That's one piece. Maybe trying to incorporate it into our radio commercial or something like that too. And then the other idea that came up after this festival was, could we make an announcement from the stages? So before thinking, the sponsors say, support the festival, please don't carry in. By the way, animals aren't allowed in the park, so that there's more, talk of it, to kind of, so people feel a little isolated potentially, like if they're holding their animal, it's not a service dog, and all of a sudden says there's no dogs in the park, people start that was some of the ideas we talked about.
And I had the issue not just having the dog there with the fireworks, but not cleaning up your mess.
Sure.
We had one, so again, you guys did a great job. So.
Yeah, thank you. A couple other things then, not more good news, probably more bad news. The KB Willett Arena roof update. So you recall when we did the presentation for O'Keefe Park, we talked about the roof. There's a roofing issue we've been working through. I have a lot of the details now, and I'll summarize it as best I can. It'll end up being a capital budget request item. But basically, when the building was built, if you consider, we have a metal deck on the roof up top. Below the metal deck is what's called fire suppression or fire protection, and then insulation. So that helps with the R value and keeping the cold in, and obviously the heat in, depending upon what time of the year. On top of the metal deck, the roofing structure that was designed and installed was basically a spray foam or foam insulation to help, again, with cooling and heating depending upon the time of the year. When you have a foam insulation on top of the metal deck, you have to put a coating that actually protects that insulation over the top. It's sprayed on, and it dries essentially, and it gives you a real thin, I think it was 60 mil or 32 mil covering to keep the foam dry. When you put that type of roofing on, it's recommended by the manufacturers that every 5 to 7 years they get replaced. The city had those on 10-year replacements, so we were doing basically resprays every 10 years. 2011 was the last time it was done, and it's likely, based on what our roofing consultants and the people that have evaluated it now said, is that there was probably some breaches and some wetness on the insulation in 2011 already, because the roof covering that's up there now, you can see some of the bubbling in areas that it didn't adhere correctly. It didn't dry flat, so you end up with ponding, and then over time, freeze and thaw cycles. We had the big project in 2019 where the roof was drilled through for a new chilling unit. We have a number of areas on top of the roof where basically the spray foam has taken on a bunch of moisture. Once that foam is wet, you actually can't dry it. Essentially what you have is you have a wet insulation on top, and if the problem continues to go on longer and longer and longer, the moisture can actually seep down in and finds a spot where it can get through, like where the screw holes are in the metal deck, or any area that there's a seam, works its way into the insulation underneath the deck, and the problem just continues to compound. When we started looking at this, we had budgeted for that recoating, because we were on that 10-year cycle. When we started taking water on a year and a half ago in the winter, we'd have a rain, there was water dripping off like the mezzanine. We thought, what's going on here? We did some patchwork. Most of it, again, was around that new chiller unit that was put on top of the roof as part of the 2019 project. What our roofing specialist has said now, basically, is we're at a point that the foam cannot be safe. It's basically shot. And putting a coating over top of it is just going to make it worse again, because it's going to bubble, and instead of getting that 5 to 7 years, you're gonna have it even sooner, and you're gonna continue to take moisture on it. It just keeps compounding. So what are our options? Essentially, what they're recommending is that we actually peel the entire spray foam off the top, which is a really physically involved process. After it's sprayed off or scraped off, you get back to the metal deck. They put a new, it's not a foam, it's a single ply. There's a technical term to it, where it basically makes instead of having the rivets or the grooves on steel, it makes it flat. Then they actually cover that with a rubber membrane roof, and then in that situation, you don't have to spray foam, and it's good for 25 to 30 years. That's what they typically put on a structure like this. Given all of that, the numbers for something like this are substantial. We're talking like a $650,000, $700,000 project when it's all said and done. There's other options. There's things like building a new roof structure over top of the roof structure. It's even more expensive than that. So what we did is we spent about $3,000 having it evaluated. We got kind of a full report on it. And in the capital budget process here for 2023, we're gonna be seeking that. Given the amount of infrastructure that was replaced in the KB Willett Arena, and obviously now we're bringing our women here, we have all kinds of activities that are going on there. It's pretty much to capacity. The roof is an aging infrastructure item that probably should have been addressed many years ago. And it's the original roof. So really our goal right now as staff is to not let that moisture get to below the deck. If that happens, then you're talking a tear off on the roof, which will make it even way worse. So what we're doing right now is we're working with, they're called IRCS or IRSC. They just specialize in roofs essentially, and they'll help us with some budgetary numbers. In the short term, very similar here, we'll probably end up spending $7,000 to $10,000 patching a few areas that are taking on moisture to make sure it doesn't go into that area underneath the deck. After we get that done, we'd carry it through the winter. This would be a project they'd have to do next year. Really what would probably happen is in April, when the snow would melt, you're gonna need probably 2 months for them to scrape that all off, and what would happen when there's nothing happening in the building. Pretty involved project. But once it's done, we would have essentially a new floor in there, which we've already gone through, which we know has been for many, many years, the new chiller, and we'd have the new roof structure above it, which is gonna really solidify the building. But not great news, but this is just the situation that we're in. We had a roofing contractor, so there's a couple models. Like the traditional model is we have a consultant who does a specification, then we bid it out, and we hire somebody. There's actually a roofing company that has their own in-house consulting. They charge nothing to spec their product essentially, and they sell you their roof. They did an evaluation of it too. They don't charge for it, and they came up with the same results. Basically, you can't coat this roof. So we know that for certainty. So we'll be submitting that, the updated number into the capital budget. We'll be meeting with the treasurer's office, the mayor. Obviously, the city council will be way aware of this as well as we get to that point. But I want to make sure Park Commission knew where we were at with that, because we've been really working through that process for the last, basically, since the bid came in too high for the recoating. I think it was late last year when we were doing that. So that's the Willett. On the community stadium improvements, good news on this front. We have a lot of things that are happening. The turf field is scheduled to be here as early as the 18th of July, as late as the 25th of July. They'll roll the old carpet out, and that's supposed to only take a couple days. And then the new carpet will be installed. Right now, August 1st was their substantial completion date. They believe they're on schedule for that. And the field being done by August 8th, which would align with an August 12th scrimmage, which is the first activity. So it's going to be very tight, but we believe everything is on par for what we're looking for scheduled. So by this time next month, hopefully we'll walk everybody out. My hope was maybe for August, Park Commission could actually have a little tour beforehand and walk on the turf. In addition to that, the video board has been ordered and the structure, and I'll get a rendering, I'll send an email on it, but essentially we've ordered, I'm gonna call it a television screen. It's huge, it's 35 feet wide by 20 feet high, but the actual video board itself will be here August 1st. We're working with Stratford Sign Company to put in the actual footings and foundations, and it'll have all the business sponsors on it. Team Sherrill Company will be on the top. That's who gave the $350,000 for that component. We believe that video board will be operational for game 1 or week 1, August 18th. gonna be happening between then and now is there's a new electrical service that has to go in on the west side where the scoreboard will go, and then we actually have to trench to make the board work in real time, so film and then play a replay right away. It has to be a closed circuit system, so the fiber is actually directly from the board to the computer. So that has to be installed between now and at August 8 too. So it looks like we're gonna have the west or east side bathrooms remodeled. My team is working on that now. We hope to have that done August 1st. The video board should be installed and the new turf will be down. And then it looks like we'll be going out for bid on the actual team room addition, likely at the end of this month, early next month, with a goal of trying to award that project in September. And if we are able to award that in September, we would have completion of that project likely around this time next year. So everything being done for the 2023 football season. So it's gonna be under construction for a long time. There's a lot to it, but everything's kind of lining up. Essentially, there's two big asks that are out that are pending off meetings that's happened with the design or the fundraising team. Once those come in, then most of that has been done. Items 1 through 8, if you remember, have all been funded based on the asks that we have at this point. One other element that will hit this board's review is we have letters of understanding with the user groups. We've now made them legal binding agreements, and all three will come here for a final review before they're actually signed. And 2 of them are basically ready and set. But rather than bringing one each month, we're going to try to bring them all at the same time. So the university has a slightly longer review process. As soon as they're done, we'll get those in front of this committee. Saying it politely, I think, yeah. We'll get that here, and then we should be set to go for that. So lots happening on that project. 2 other small things that I'm sorry to get listed. The comprehensive outdoor recreation plan. Tomorrow night, as a reminder, if you're interested, you're all invited, but so is the whole community for a public input meeting at 6 o'clock. This is really a further discussion than what the actual survey is. So basically, Rattler will highlight a few things up on the a presentation format, and then just have a discussion and conversation. What do you like? What do you don't like? What would you like to see? And that will make it into the final report. In addition, an hour before that, user groups have all been invited at 5 o'clock. So basically any organization or member of those organizations that are parts of the different park system, and we have a lot of them, have all been invited to come to a separate meeting at 5 o'clock. So everyone's invited to take the survey. This is the only in-person kind of component to have a discussion. So once that happens, on the 15th, the survey closes, and then we'll start compiling data, and there'll be some more information that comes back to the Board Commission. So lastly then, Iverson's playground. We are at a point now where the old playground's been removed, and we've poured the concrete for the basically approach and the sidewalk. That playground will go in next week, Monday. So we hope by the end of next week that will be up and ready for everybody. So lots happening on the project side, but a lot of good news too. So that's my report.
I had a question for Dan, if you can slow down for a second. Dan, I noticed the online survey, it didn't ask place of residency. Are we doing anything to try to determine, for the meeting tomorrow night, how many people that are there to provide input are city residents as opposed to greater community residents? I mean, I think it's important that the city residents' opinions weigh more heavily than non-residents, since city is paying the bill on it.
Sure. No, my understanding, I think tomorrow is a full attendance will be taken, so people sign essentially when they attend. And I can verify whether or not we're asking the address.
We should, yeah, we should do that.
That should be, yep, we should be able to.
Thank you.
I think the last I heard too, we've had about 750 surveys taken, so around 3% of the population.
Good. I have one other question for you. This is probably a real long shot, but if there would be any extra money that would be donated or collected through the Gerke Park, the stadium project, could that go towards the roof?
Great question. So actually, the project team talked about that, and I think the short version is I don't believe, because it's the city's asset and the roof issue's been some time, it sounds like it'd be a difficult ask of like a private company to say, hey, would you help fix an issue that maybe the city cycle the maintenance plan wasn't set very well. So right now, basically, in conversation with Tim Sherrill, the idea is that the city would probably be on the hook for that whole part of it. And then the addition and all the new improvements, as part of the fundraising ask. I think the budget's gonna be chewed up real quickly anyways with all the other things that are going on. But basically, and I kind of relied on his input a little bit on that too, because he's on the private business side. He said it's a very difficult ask to come back in and say, okay, our roof is bad, can you help support the roof?
Yeah.
He said most private businesses would most likely say, well, the city should have been taking care of that anyways. So,
Thank you.
that's the best way I can answer that.
Thank you.
questions of Director Kramer in his report? Just a quick reminder on the location for the meeting tomorrow night, Dan?
Yeah, it's right at the Park and Rec office, 2442 Sims Avenue.
In the gymnasium or basketball court?
So
or-
we're gonna put the projector up first in the meeting room, depending
Okay.
on numbers. we
Okay.
could always move it.
Okay.
We'll probably take the tables out and have chairs and rows is what our idea was, so it's not, I don't think there'll be too much right in that should.
So we could really come at 5 o'clock if we wanted to, just to see what people have to say.
Sure.
Okay, great.
Because I mean, as you know, the user groups are probably gonna have bigger asks than maybe. the
Oh,
community,
yes.
about school improvements or things of that nature, so.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I want to know where they live.
Right, any other questions for Director Kramer? Right, there's no other questions about the report. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Liz, second?
Second.
Sue? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good evening.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.